It turns out people will pay a lot of money just to clear levels, and just keep being promised there's something at the end of all of them, which is why I played 2 dots for 4 years.
After strolling down a particularly frustrating memory lane in part 1 of our series on the inspirational 1993 best-selling book Chicken Soup for the Soul, Sarah Marshall and I are following up in part 2 with a tale of 2 motivational wealth coaches who went on to create one of the biggest cultural touchstones of the self-help obsessed 1990s. We'll also take a look at what is currently happening with the failing and flailing feel-good company as new leadership has led it down a dark and exploitative path, allegedly. Of course, Sarah and I continue to get hella mad at the book's messages of neoliberal mysticism and prosperity gospel manifestation, especially in the context of what is currently happening with the Chicken Soup for the Soul company, as well as American politics at large. So now, let's dive back into this text, full of what contemporary folklorists call glurge, a sickly sweet subgenre of the urban legend. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. Hello, okay, fuck yeah. Hello, Sarah. You are back for part 2, a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Chelsey. Please, can I have some more? Or will I have to give myself sponge baths?
You can't have your pudding if you don't eat your meat. All right. Great. Strong start.
I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Well, on our first part of our Chicken Soup for the Soul series, we kind of just put this sickly sweet book into its context when it came out in the early 90s. And we read quite a few stories and talked about them to kind of like get in the spirit.
Just right into that bowl of chicken soup, just backstroke around in there.
Floating around on our backs, scalding hot.
While being told that it's our fault, because if we were trying harder, we would not get scalded.
Exactly. If we just manifested a cooler soup, we'd be fine. So this episode's going to be a little bit different. We're going to kind of do a bit more on the creators of the book and kind of where the company is at today. And, just some general discussion about something we're calling neoliberal mysticism, which is a very cool term that I did not invent.
But but let me tell you, I would have believed it if you said you did. Ugh. But who did? Do we know?
Yes, but I will tell you in a little bit. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm so excited to learn about these 2 maniacs because honestly, I have been kind of wondering about them, for about 25 years.
For your whole dang life.
Yeah.
Okay, but to just get us in the mood to learn about these men and the company at large, I'm going to read you one last story. Does that sound good?
It sounds so good. And after we're done recording this, I would love for you to just come read me the rest of the stories.
You got it, dude.
Yeah.
Okay. This one actually may be my favorite.
Oh my God. There's a lot of buildup.
All right, here we go. It's called Glenna's Goal Book. It was 19... Nope. It was 19... Stop it. It was 1977, and I was short on dreams, a single mother to 3 growing daughters, struggling with house and car payments, ready for a change. I decided one night to take part in a seminar by a motivational speaker, and he taught the group about the I times V equals R principle. Imagination mixed with vividness becomes reality. Our brains actually do not speak in words, he said, but rather in pictures. Speak for yourself. And so when we imagine vividly what we truly desire most, it will most certainly become reality. I already knew the Bible's perspective on the subject from Psalms 37:4, that God gives to us the desires of our heart, and from Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. In order to transform my list of prayers into vividness, I found pictures in an old magazine that, as the Lord said, would show the desires of my heart, and I put them in a photo album that cost a lot of money. I waited for what I knew would come. I did my best to make each clipped picture as specific as I could. They went like this. 1, a handsome man.
Just any handsome man, personality irrelevant.
Doesn't matter. 2, a couple standing at the altar.
For us to have sex with in a foursome.
Hopefully.
I'll stop.
3, a beautiful bouquet of flowers. 4, diamond-encrusted jewelry. After all, God loved David and Solomon, 2 of the richest men of all time. 5, a Caribbean island on a bright blue ocean. 6, a beautiful home. 7, brand new furniture. 8, a businesswoman who had just been announced as the vice president of a mega corporation. These were my dreams, and I waited. On a late morning, a couple months later, I was cruising down a California highway and a sleek Cadillac passed me and impressed me quite a bit. The driver caught me looking at his beautiful car, and he smiled right at me. And of course, I smiled back, as I always do. Then something happened. He got behind my car and followed me for miles until I grew terrified. Finally, I pulled over and parked, and he did the same. And can you believe it? I went on to marry him.
He took me back to his cabin where the businesswoman who had just been named VP of a mega corporation was tied to the bed.
Can you believe it? After a couple more dates, I learned that his favorite hobby was collecting big diamonds.
What?
And wouldn't you know, right after our first date, he surprised me with a dozen roses.
I thought you were going to say a dozen diamonds.
After 2 years, we were engaged, standing at the altar in our gown and tux, like the couple I had cut out from the magazine. Not long before the wedding, he told me his idea for our honeymoon, St. John's Island in the Caribbean. It wasn't until a year after our marriage that I revealed my picture prayer book to Jim. At that time, we had bought a stunning new house and were in the process of furnishing it with the kind of elegant furniture I had once pasted in my book. Soon after, I was promoted to Vice President of Human Resources, the first woman ever to achieve the role. This might sound like a far-fetched fairy tale, but it happened to me. Now Jim and I have a prayer picture book of our own, and God continues to bless us with all the desires of our hearts, showing that these powerful principles of faith really do work. So I tell you, make up your mind about exactly what you desire in every facet of your life and picture it as vividly as you can. Then create your own picture book of these goals and construct the reality you want. God promised us all the desires of our hearts, and nothing is impossible.
Wow. I love it.
I just love diamonds.
His hobby was collecting big diamonds. You're like, no, spend more time on that one.
No pretense of understanding the Bible.
No, not at all. It's like, why don't you and Jim ask God to give some big diamonds to some other people? Or better yet, I mean, it seems like you've got a bunch, so... Or no? Okay.
Collecting big diamonds.
What? Like, who wrote this book? I guess you're going to tell me today.
Well, I mean, all these different people wrote their little sections.
And they're all...
Yeah, this woman's a Christian wealth coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm not like saying their names because I'm not trying to like put them on blast.
Yeah. But you know, you can figure it out.
I mean, I did watch a video of this particular woman, and she kind of is like funny and does these talks, and I was laughing.
Yeah, reading. I remember this story too. Like, I remember all these once you've read them, and like, yeah, just feeling like, huge if true.
Huge if true, man. All the desires of your heart.
All you have to do is let a man follow you down the freeway and you know, give him a smile and talk to him and pull over and let him approach you to either kill you or marry you, and then, you know, that'll all work out, probably.
Hopefully he's got a bunch of big diamonds on the soles of his shoes.
He's a rich boy, don't try to hide it. Yeah.
No.
Man, what a book, though. It is like, I mean, I do feel like there are these books that come along that like are obviously like, no one is accusing of being art, but at the same time, they like capture the American mind in a way that perfectly highlights who we are. And this is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't, for me, this is kind of the premier example of the damaging part of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea that you can manifest great wealth.
Mm-hmm. And that God owes you the great wealth you demand, even.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we're going to get into this, but I do want to like upfront, because I know there's probably listeners out there. I know there's people close to me that do believe in like the manifestation principle. And though I personally don't, I don't think there's anything wrong with creating a vision board or, you know, believing that the things that you want will come to you. But the problem becomes the blaming of others when those things don't come to them.
Yeah.
So it's this idea of like, poverty is your fault because you didn't manifest wealth. That's where I start to become absolutely enraged at this content. And that's really why I wanted to talk about it. So I just want to preface that for all of our potential manifestors out there. Big love. Keep doing your thing. Just don't blame people who don't have wealth.
Yeah, exactly.
For not manifesting it, and not because there are systemic issues at play that keep many of us down and will continue to do so until we attack systemic issues and don't attack each other.
And then, you know, and let's all rub our hands together to get some healing energy going before we attack the system.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me have my little soapbox moment.
No, it's so important. And like, we have our first MLM president, you know? Well, we have our first MLM president again, but the point still stands.
Yeah, we do. So speaking of, Sarah, right before we started this recording, you told me that you just did a vision board, and I want to hear about it. I want to save it for the show, and I wanted to save it for us talking right now. So let me see what you got.
I know. I think it's so important. I think that I'm excited to show it to you in comparison to the one we just talked about. And I will say that like, this is also like, I did this in the like very late last night when I had a friend over and I was very sleepy. So I kind of didn't really try very hard, but I'd also like, I feel like it's complete. I don't feel like I need to add anything to it. I think it's communicating everything I want for this year. So yeah, I'm just going to show this to you.
Ooh, it's gorgeous. Oh, it's gorgeous.
What do you see?
Very different than that woman's vision board. Okay, so the first thing I'm seeing are two hands holding some, I believe maybe a potato and an apple and a pomegranate, just sort of hugging them to the chest.
I think they're turnips, but they're like beautiful, some kind of beautiful, you know, fruit, something lovely that someone has grown and is holding with their hands.
So what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, it means I want to grow root vegetables. Like it's pretty literal, but it's also, you know, hands nourishing the earth and growing crops and like the fruits of a person's labors. I mean, and what I like too, like this is my own little witchiness. Like I believe in manifesting to the extent that I think that if I'm paying attention to what I want, I'm more likely to go for it. But I don't believe that it should cost anyone any money.
Yeah.
And I also think that people who are good at manifesting weirdly often come from generational wealth or some other kind of massive privilege, or they're like very attractive or like celebrities or something.
Imagine that.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Really
I don't know why. I've noticed it though. And I like to do something where I'm kind of like just pulling out pictures because they strike me as like, yes, this is the vibe. And then once I put them together and, you know, I haven't done a vision board in probably since adolescence, but there's something I like about just kind of having images that you like that you put around the house where you kind of notice things about them and are like, maybe that's kind of something I like about it. And I feel like a person holding 3 root vegetables is like giving the 3 of Pentacles in a fun way.
Ooh, I like that. That's fun. That's fun. Okay. So now next to that, we have what looks like a sliced gourd of some kind.
Yeah.
What kind of gourd am I seeing?
I think it's an acorn squash, but I wouldn't swear to it. Yeah, it's just a nice orange cross section of an acorn squash.
Yeah, and it says family meal on the top of it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that, Sarah. I'm your psychoanalyst right now.
I love it. Yeah.
It's kind of vaginal. What are we?
Well, that's
here?
Good point. See, exactly. See, this is my kind of vision board. Yeah, it is. Now that you say that. Yeah, and now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, it's a cross section of an acorn squash that's full of seeds. You know, I mostly pulled it out because it was orange and I was excited about that. But like, yeah, it represents like fertility and growth and vaginas, obviously.
Of course.
But also like, I mean, you and I have a running joke that I'm actually very serious about, that I want us to live on a farm and have a cow.
Yeah.
Someday. And this is, you know, we're going to eat squash. And they'll also have squash for the cows, too.
And you just recently were over at mine and Miranda's house, and we planted a bunch of garlic with your help and gift of soil and all of the necessities. And that was such a lovely experience. And, you know, now we just have to wait until the spring and we'll have a shit ton of garlic?
We will. Summer, probably.
Summer, okay. Yeah. And then I got this mushroom growing kit. I'm growing some mushrooms in the laundry room, and it's thrilling.
And it's the mushroom now. You can make a sign that says mush.
And Sarah's been growing all this corn. You've got a corn-filled front yard. It's amazing. It's so inspiring. It's like I've just wanted to grow things for so long, and it's just so hard to get started. But you're like,
it is.
You're really doing it.
It's like hunting. Yeah. Actually, I feel it. I mean, there's so many things like sailing or like, you know.
Yeah.
Like a lot of life skills where it's like you feel like unless you had a parent who taught you this, it can often feel like, and I think Americans are so big on the idea of like what we do is dictated by our identity. And this idea of like, if I'm like a city person, then like, that's just it for me. Yeah. It's like, no, you can just learn stuff. Yeah. And like life is more fun if you're always learning things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have mushrooms.
Is there anything else you want to talk about on your vision board, Sarah?
Oh, yeah. I guess so. Rounding it out on the bottom, I have a banoffee pie, which is a very maligned pie, and also a British pie. So I would love to make one for you. Yeah. And then we have a picture of a salad, which is, these are all from like old Bon Appetit issues. And this is actually, to me, the height of sort of like laughable mid-30s millennial pseudo elegance, which is like a chickpea, tuna, radicchio and parsley salad, which is basically like the maligned canned good, you know, foods of 1950s housewives, which I will always defend, but like gussied up with a nice leafy green as if to make us feel like we're not all living in a massive recession. But I really just picked it because the radicchio is a nice pink color and I thought it looked nice. And it says, make lunch for someone else on it. And I want to make lunch for someone else. For all the someone's else
yeah
in my life, including you. And I promise not to make you a little tuna salad.
Oh, thanks. Because I don't like tuna salad.
Yeah.
So appreciate you.
You're safe.
So that's like a lovely vision board, and a vision board of things that like you really can manifest.
I really can make this pie. I think, I'm really trying to like focus on just like goals that are just like very mundane and simple, but that represent wanting a pie. And then rather than waiting for a scary man to give you a pie, like learning how to make the pie and then realizing you enjoy some aspect of the pie making process, which then turns you on to maybe the next thing you like, or maybe you hate it and you're like, oh my God, let's not do that again. Maybe I'll date a VP of HR for a mega corporation and they'll make me a banoffee pie.
The only magic required for your vision board is motivation.
It's true. And a little bit of common sense around knives.
That's good. Yeah. I don't have that. As you know, I tore into my finger with a butter knife recently and had to get 4 stitches.
Yeah, but you'd never had stitches before.
I had never
and
had.
I've had stitches so many times, so, you know.
And I'm such an injury kid. I mean, I had to have the ambulance called to the house.
Wow, there they come. It's the injury kid.
It's the injury kid. I had to have a ambulance come to my house when I was a child because my box turtle latched onto my arm and wouldn't let go.
That's so scary. There's nothing scarier than a turtle.
I mean, really. But I was more scared because they were like, I think we're going to have to cut his head off. And I was like, I will live with this turtle on my arm for the rest of my days, sir. But they didn't have to. My stepdad just poured some warm water down its shell, and then it had to take a breath so it opens its mouth. Imagine.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
I think there isn't that is a chicken soup for the soul story.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad. All right. Are you ready to get into it?
I'm so ready. I am, because this is the most fun I've had in all of 2025 so far.
I'm so glad. Okay. So straight off the bat, I want to give credit to Amanda Chicago Lewis, who's a writer, and she wrote this incredible Business Insider article called Soup to Nuts, which is something I'm utilizing a lot throughout the episode. I will link it in the episode notes so you all can read it because it's really worth reading. It's so good. And so thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda, so much.
More after this. And now, back to the show. So, okay, we'll start with Jack Canfield. We'll start with his childhood, of course.
And what went wrong?
So he grew up in Ohio and then West Virginia, and his childhood, by his account, was difficult. He was poor, and he faced abuse from a religious stepfather. But still, he made it to Harvard. He points this out a lot.
As a lot of people who went to Harvard do. Although, to be fair, a lot of people went to Harvard, and then when you ask them where they went to college, they get a little bit embarrassed and they don't really want to tell you because it's just uncomfortable. And I respect that.
Yeah. Shout out.
Yeah. Shout out to people who are ashamed of having gone to Harvard.
So he also likes to point out that he taught at a majority Black high school for a while.
Good for you. Good for you.
I'm guessing in the Baltimore slums. That's a throwback to the first episode. So from there, he took a job working for this famous insurance mogul who taught him all about the law of attraction.
Did he tell him that he was a creative genius?
Did he pin a blue ribbon right on his lapel and say, "Daddy, are you my daddy?" Instead of "Are you my mother?" we should start saying,
"Are you my daddy?" Yes. "Are you my papa?"
Do you know what the law of attraction is, Sarah?
I do vaguely, because I remember when The Secret came out, and I assume that those things are roughly interchangeable, although I could be wrong. Yeah. And The Secret was like, I remember when this book came out, it was like touted by Oprah. It came out in like 2007. It was quite huge for a while. This was the time of like Madonna doing Kabbalah, bananas and pajamas as well. And it was like, I remember going to like the website to try and figure out like, what is this book? What is The Secret? And it was like, you had to like really click around, and like finally they would be like, the secret is that if you think about what you want, you'll get it. And it's like, well, I mean, statistically, there's probably a slight edge, because if you're not thinking about what you want like ever, then like it would be harder to even know what you were aiming for. But obviously that's ridiculous, but also like many ridiculous ideas, it has really caught on.
Yeah. Yes.
But I assume it's older than that. I mean, how did this book come into our lives?
So it does come from this 19th century movement called the New Thought movement. And it's really at its core the idea that like positive thoughts lead to positive outcomes, but not just like, oh, you're positive, so maybe you'll make positive changes in your life. It's much more mystical than that. It's like, is it like your brain waves are attracting stuff or something? Yeah. It's like the idea that anything you truly wish for can become a reality, basically through manifestation, and that like this positive mindset will attract success and happiness and wealth and, you know, good relationships, kind of because thoughts are made of pure energy, and then energy attracts like energy. So
Right. Which feels like it's even like, I bet spiritualists were, I mean, I know they were because you mentioned that to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The spiritualism definitely influenced the New Thought movement and would later influence the New Age movement. So,
I mean, it was a good one. And
yeah.
And it is, it's like not inherently a dangerous idea. It's just that it's so easy to make into a dangerous idea, I think.
Yeah. And it just does go back to kind of what we were saying at the beginning about once it gets turned into kind of a negative and you're blamed for everything and structural issues are ignored, that something like this becomes ugly. Or if you're charging people a bunch of money to teach them about this so-called magical principle, right?
That you just explained to me very nicely in a very short amount of time. So why can't other people do that?
So Jack Canfield, kind of to drive this point home, he believes that no matter what stands in your way, whatever structural issues stand in your way, racism, classism, any ism, you can make your own dreams come true, but only if you take 100% responsibility.
Oh my
period.
God.
Okay. So in that article by Amanda Chicago Lewis, she quotes him as saying, "A lot of people get cancer, but I always ask them, did you eat an organic diet? Did you drink filtered water? You're responsible for maintaining your ignorance. You're responsible for not making enough money to be able to afford the stuff you need to be able to buy."
Oh, let's I don't want to say what I want to do to this guy, but it's nothing good.
No, it feels really bad.
Yeah. God. Wow, that's over the top. I mean,
really
that's the implicit message of the book, but it is just like, it's something else to hear it stated out loud like that.
I know, it really is.
What if you're a child who lives in the area known as Love Canal? Never mind.
So, yeah, it's a really upsetting quote to me. And I also think it's so odd because it's like, you get cancer in your life later on. So you're like supposed to retroactively have known, no matter who you are, that you should have been eating an organic diet, that you should have been drinking filtered water, not to say
which probably doesn't really affect anything. But even if it did, that's not anything that somebody was surmising before about 1975, I should think.
Yeah. And it's like, it's what I think of like, everyone who isn't saved by Jesus goes to hell, where it's like some people never heard of Jesus.
Right. And then you get like that, the missionary guy going to like the people who had no, like the North Sentinelese or whatever, who had no contact with any outsiders because he needed to tell them about Jesus so they wouldn't go to hell. And it was like, no, dude, I think they're good.
Yeah.
And then they killed him.
Yeah. 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 But it's like, a lot of people know nothing about organic food and can't buy organic food or drink filtered water.
Yeah.
But it's their responsibility.
Right. And also it's like, I get that, like, I think there's a very basic human need to feel like you're more in control of something like cancer than you are. And I think the way we're behaving about microplastics now is one of those things where it's like, it's like scary, the studies that are coming out, but also like I've seen just in sort of like gardening social media, a lot of emphasis on like, don't use plastics in your gardening. And it's like, that's impossible. And you're making something that is like already intimidating to people, like an even higher barrier to entry, because now you're telling them they're going to like die if they use plastic seed starting stuff, which is like, if that's happening, then like I don't know. It doesn't seem to be happening in big enough numbers that it seems like what people are saying has been going on for decades and decades is as dangerous as it is, But it's like, it makes sense to me that magical thinking prevails when the world is scary. But again, there's a difference between the individual sort of like personal magical thinking that we do, which I think is just part of human life, versus making it a career out of it, and a very lucrative one, it sounds.
Yes, exactly. So in 1980, Jack Canfield is longing to bring his messages about the law of attraction to more people. And he attends this holistic health conference called How to Triple Your Income and Double Your Time Off in 2 years or Less.
Wow.
Put on by a man named Sarah Mark Victor Hansen.
Really an assassin kind of a name, you know?
It really is. Yes. Yeah. And Mark is our second creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Mm-hmm.
So at this conference, the two boys become buddies. Now, Mark is a prosperity gospel, non-denominational Christian. He refers to himself as a visionary, which is always a good sign.
Right. It's always great when someone has self-appointed themselves a visionary.
It's like every time someone's like, I'm Jesus, you're like, why are you such a piece of shit? There's never a nice guy or cool guy who says I'm Jesus. Never.
Right. I know. The thing is, ironically, that I think like an actual Jesus type would be like, oh, I'm just a guy.
Yes. So not only does he call himself a visionary, but he likes to talk about how he has studied everything. He just has studied everything. And that he works with the top AI guys in the world.
Mark.
Whatever that fucking means.
Like in the 80s, he's saying that?
No, like now. I'm kind of painting a picture of these men.
Yeah.
In general.
I love people who just like everything they claim to be doing is like the top, the best, the most. It's like,
yeah,
whatever. That sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Like is an obvious lie. And also I don't care.
Yes. And you are right. He does exaggerate his stories, and even like Jack Canfield has kind of been like, oh, Mark, he's just a big thinker. He, he does seem to just flat out lie. He also likes to go on YouTube shows and podcasts and just rail against socialism.
Great.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. I don't know if it surprises you.
Not in the slightest. I do feel like he sounds like, anyone who is that grandiose, I think, is a fairly unhappy and petty person generally. So,
yeah,
unless they're like, look at Muhammad Ali, right? Because he did great trash talking. That was a big part of his persona. He was seen as like, being very good at like psyching people out through high self-esteem, I guess.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that's not grandiosity, because that's just like a tactic in the sport you're doing, and also a fairly accurate statement of fact.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's like, and it's something that you do is like part of what you do, and you're taking joy in it. There's like a poetry to the kind of stuff that he said. But what we see more often, I think, is just this kind of thing where it's like, you cannot stop talking about how happy you are and how well you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, happy people shut up about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we already, in the first episode, we kind of talked about how they kind of created the Chicken Soup books and the story of their, chin up attitude in the face of so much rejection from publishers.
When they were living in the back of a bakery, sleeping on bags of sawdust.
Yeah, right. Not
and
them.
Broken glass.
Not them. They were just weirdly trying to force people at their seminars to buy multiple copies of their book.
Hey, that's what that Vietnamese guy should have done.
Yeah.
Made everyone buy a stupid book.
Yeah. Okay. In 2006, so this is more than a decade after the huge amount of success that these men found with the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, our friend Jack Canfield is prominently featured in a little documentary called The Secret.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, it's all connected.
Yes, it is.
Oh, God. It's wheels within wheels, Chelsey.
I know. And fun fact, The Secret actually outsold the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. So,
oh, wow.
They lose.
It's the more successful sequel.
Yeah, but Jack's in it, so I guess it counts.
It's very impressive to be part of two equally ridiculous cultural phenomena like that, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, so in The Secret, Jack Canfield tells the Chicken Soup origin story a little bit differently than I told it in the first part of this series. So he says a few years before Chicken Soup for the Soul, he was making just $8,000 a year, but he wanted to make $100,000 in a year.
Okay.
He saw no possibility or strategy. He was like, how will I make $100,000 in a year? He was like, I'm going to believe and act as if it were already true.
Oh, my God.
He believed that if he closed his eyes and visualized it, it was already achieved. So he made a $100,000 bill and put it on his ceiling. And every night he looked at the $100,000 bill, closed his eyes, and visualized. Nothing happened for a month, but he just kept doing it. Okay. Then one day he had an idea in the shower. He thought, if I can sell 400,000 copies.
Why do we have to know you're in the shower?
He just wants us to think about that slam and bod. I know. It's okay. He manifested it.
One day he was washing his balls and he suddenly realized, I know he can't put that in.
I can.
Okay.
He thought, if I can sell 400,000 copies of my book for a quarter each, that would equal $100,000.
Not really, but whatever.
And then in kind of like this confusing part, he says that he saw the National Enquirer at the supermarket and thought, wow, if readers knew about my book, certainly 400,000 people would read it. I don't know how they're
This
connected.
is like all of the story. Like this could be like if I was talking to someone and she was like, my son has been doing the cutest things this week. He's only in first grade. And then you told all these stories. I'd be like, yeah, that's cute for someone that age.
Yeah.
Any older, though, I'd be worried.
Yeah, you should be.
He's staring at $100,000 bill he made every night.
And also, it's like, why the National Enquirer of all magazines? You just saw it.
I think what I'm realizing is that this man or that these two guys are just like kings of the weird detail.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Like they'll say something as if it's normal and you're like, wait, what? And then it just continues and you never get any follow through on it.
Yes. So 6 weeks later, he's giving a talk and a lady walks up to him and says she wants to interview him. And it turns out that she is a freelancer who most often sells her work to the National Enquirer.
Oh my God.
But it's like, what? I still don't understand what the National Enquirer has to do with selling 400,000 copies of his book. I don't get it.
I think he's like, if only my book were being sold in the impulse buy section instead of the National Enquirer, people will buy it. And it's like, yeah, people will buy anything if you put it there. I mean, they're standing there looking at stuff. It just works.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. He's not expressing himself very well.
No, he's not.
For someone who's written 2 bestsellers.
So after that article came out that the woman had written about him, which I do not believe was in the National Enquirer.
No.
Book sales took off. And he made $92,000 that year.
Wow.
And he's very clear to be like, just because it wasn't $100,000 doesn't mean it didn't work, okay?
It didn't work. By your own metric, it did not work.
Well, don't tell that to Jack because he doesn't like it.
Sorry.
So then right after that, his wife says, can we make it work for $1 million? And then the publisher of Chicken Soup for the Soul wrote a royalty check for $1 million with a smiley face. And of course, he would be able to cash it later that year.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It is just, yeah. And I remember, like, now that you're saying this, when The Secret came out, I remember reading this, like, story in an article somewhere or something. And it's just like, yeah, I guess the secret to prosperity in America is having already written a huge bestseller in which you took a bunch of other people's weird stories, put them all together, and then paid a lump sum, probably, in order to have it published. And then after all that, we're able to, use that to build your $1 billion wealth.
Sure helps.
That you manifested just by wanting it enough.
So in 2007, Canfield and Hansen officially sold the Chicken Soup for the Soul business. Jack Canfield just said he wasn't feeling it anymore, and God told him to sell it in the midst of an expensive divorce.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure God told him to do whatever he was getting divorced over as well.
Yeah, and God probably told him to hide his money in an offshore account.
God is always saying that to people. Yeah, it's interesting.
He didn't do that. I'm not saying he did that, okay? They did sell the Chicken Soup for the Soul business for $63 million. So
What?
They made a lot of money from this empire.
Why isn't there a chicken soup for the Soul theme park land where it's just the whirling teacups, but they're full of soup?
That would be really fun. Isn't there that Simpsons episode where they're on the teacups and then a giant boiling teapot pours it into the spinning cups?
I don't know, but that sounds right.
Might be something else.
I always think of that makes me think of the Simpsons episode where Aunt Patty or Aunt Selma, I can never remember which one, wants to have kids. And so she takes Bart and Lisa to Duff World and then realizes at the end of the day that she does not want to have children. She wants an iguana, which is just a very relatable experience.
So to this day, Jack Canfield runs self-improvement seminars, and he's been doing this for decades. And he teaches the principles that you control and are responsible and attract whatever happens to you in your life, and structural systemic issues be damned. It's an all-American bootstrap approach that privileges individualism, like so many parts of our American culture. And like a lot of these kinds of financial coaching, spiritualist bent seminars, they're a little bit pyramid scheme-esque.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Quite surprising.
Yeah. And in that article I mentioned by Amanda Chicago Lewis, she writes about attending these seminars that went from $14,000 to $24,000 in these escalating costs as you reach like new levels of this, growth.
Oh my God. Wait, $24,000?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Wait, you're paying that much money to go to a seminar?
Yes.
What? Are they telling you how to shit gold at these things?
No.
What do we know what they're doing?
I mean, they're kind of they're teaching the same kind of stuff that we've been talking about, right?
You could go to the Eras tour if you wanted good vibes, and it wouldn't even cost that much.
I will say he has reduced his fees quite a bit now, which I suppose is nice.
Good for him. I'm sure the recession bit into that a little bit.
Yes. But I have quite a bit of like personal experience with this kind of stuff. We did an episode many years ago now about my time spent as a kid and teenager in a self-actualization program that shall not be named for fear of litigation because they're very, very scary. And this was like very much what we were being taught was like, law of attraction, you're responsible for all of your faults, take control. And I had to, eventually actually escape the vibe because it was very, very scary there. And so much of it was focused on convincing you to pay more money for the next level and that you'd never be happy if you didn't get to this next level, or you'd forever be carrying this baggage.
Yeah. It turns out people will pay a lot of money just to clear levels.
Yeah.
And just keep being promised there's something at the end of all of them.
Yeah.
Which is why I played 2 dots for 4 years.
Yeah. And I think it's important when we think about seminars like this, which feel so akin to reading Chicken Soup for the Soul, but just at this like extreme level.
Yeah.
It's not that like, I went there as a kid. I went there as a teenager. I did leave some of these experiences, which were like, 12 hours a day, 1 or 2 breaks, like very, very intense. But I did leave feeling kind of ecstatic, right? Like kind of unnervingly ecstatic, as you do when you do any kind of pseudo spiritual or spiritual thing.
Yeah.
But the problem is that once you leave, that feeling that you got that feels so profound, that healing that you felt like you had, those like big revelations you felt like you had, kind of start to like disappear and everything starts to go back to normal.
Right.
You might retain some of the good parts of it. And some people get a lot of good stuff from this. Again, like a lot of people I know did the same thing I did and had a great time and it was fine. Wasn't fine for me. And yeah, I just think this mechanism of creating an ecstatic experience with a lot of closeness and then kind of convincing someone that they're going to need that again once they leave. And once they do leave, they're going to start needing it again because that's not how life is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just kind of is like this weird addiction. And I kind of feel like Chicken Soup for the Soul is that on just like this much smaller scale. Like once you close that book, that magic is trapped inside of it because it's not actually applicable to your life and you're going to need to go back for more.
Yeah. And luckily there's 85 other books.
Yeah. And you're like, I may not be a woman golfer, but maybe I can get one more hit,
Yeah, totally. And I feel like and that's kind of how I think like the emotional experience of like sentimentality works, which I don't have a great definition of sentimentality in my pocket, but we know it when we see it, right? And like this thing of just like these stories where it's just like no one behaves this way because people in real life are not this simple or predictable. And I think actually, a lot of bad true crime, I think, is comforting to people because it is based on the premise that people are very predictable and very easy to handicap in like a sports betting kind of a way. And that like, a good detective is able, and that, you can also do this from an armchair perspective, is able to have like a limited list of sort of things and potential outcomes and just like put it all together all by themselves, and that we should all be able to do this. And really the fact of the matter is that we can't. Like sometimes things are obvious and sometimes, things line up and you have the information you need, but like information is hard to come by a lot. If we're talking about a crime, like investigations are always imperfect. There's always stuff we don't know that presents other possibilities. So there is kind of a fallacy that there's only a certain number of possible outcomes and you just have to choose between them.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the same principle, it feels like, with these highly sort of stylized sentimental fables where it's like people just kind of exhibit a limited number of characteristics and they're kind of like NPCs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's a good way to put it. And I think, as we talked about in the first episode, a lot of these stories in Chicken Soup for the Soul are written by these like transformative wealth coaches like Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield. And a lot of them, if you look into their lives, did come from humble beginnings, right? So a lot of them were not generationally wealthy. They were like people who saw themselves as hard workers and who made their own wealth with their skill sets that they cultivated.
Which is arguably a more dangerous person than someone generationally wealthy who might, be so incompetent that they just never, leave the polo grounds.
Yeah, yes. But it's like they do, I think, for the ones that we can be generous to. And I don't know if that's Jack Canfield. I don't know if that's Mark Victor Hansen. From what I've seen, I don't like.
It's not looking good.
But I think that maybe people do feel that there is some kind of like magic at work behind this success that they've found. But what I think happens is that they become blinded to the fact that there's also chance and coincidence and like it just can't happen for everybody. It's not going to happen for everybody. But what they do is take their story and say, well, I was able to do it, so you definitely can do it as long as you believe.
Well, and I'm not saying that's true of these guys necessarily, but do you think that can be a function of poor self-esteem sometimes? Or like not even, that's kind of a maybe, because like anyone can have poor self-esteem. Sure. But I think being a wealth, coach is like, you're on another level. You've turned your whatever pathology you have into your job in some way. But like this thing where like, because like I have a weird success story. Like I have a podcast that people listen to, which is statistically unusual.
Yes, that's true.
Right. Out of all the podcasts that have ever been born. And that's like mostly about luck, right? It's like timing. It's about like who you happen to meet, who you happen to work with, just all these different, and then like who you are, like the resources that you have to sort of develop into the person who's able to seize this opportunity when it does come along. And to me, it's like the randomness of it has always been the key, where it's just like 99% of what happens to me is just like blind chance and something I had no role in.
And you would never say to someone, you can too.
And I wouldn't, but I feel like I have felt my brain like flirting with feeling that way in an uncomfortable capacity where like, when you're kind of like rejecting sort of the fruits of your labor in a way. You're like, well, I don't know. Just, I guess anyone can do this because I don't like myself and I did. So, I mean, you could.
Okay.
Which I don't think that these guys are doing necessarily. No. I think that, yeah, I'm perhaps expressing a more feminine perspective.
I'll say.
Yeah. But yeah, I do find it, yeah, like so interesting to see the way people psychologically deal with having gotten some kind of bounty, with having gotten lucky, because that's what it is. It's like winning the lottery, like having career success in a way that puts you above most of your peers. It's mostly luck. I think no matter what you say, it's mostly just about the luck of various circumstances throughout your life leading to that point. And so rationalizing it is like trying to make sense of a lottery win. It's just like you kind of maybe fall back on whatever superstitions and magical thinking you had to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it doesn't mean that these people didn't work super hard. I mean, I think we can definitely say Jack Canfield is a hard worker.
Yes. But also maybe some people should work less hard, you know? That's one of the things I believe.
Yes. But there are also people that work way harder than Jack Canfield.
Yes, that too.
That cannot escape structural issues no matter how hard they try, because America is a nightmare.
Well, and I think what I'm thinking of in terms of like people should work less hard is a lot of things. And one of them is this like, you know, we're now in such an age of like performative, like pain for like the rise and grind, you know, whatever, CEO, buy my course, live like me, run a half marathon before 6 a.m. kind of a thing, where like people who are performing affluence in this way today often do something that's very performatively grueling, as if to prove that they deserve their success because they're suffering intentionally. And therefore they're suffering more than someone who's just like working in a job that cannot possibly allow them to save money. And so it's like, well, yeah, I'm really lucky and rich, but I'm actually in more pain than you are, or I'm trying to be.
Interesting.
It's a theory I have.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just, I think of someone like Oprah, who obviously, you know, came from really, really difficult background, had to face a lot of shit that most people don't have to face, and had to move through the world in such a way to reach the, you know, pinnacle of success and become a billionaire. And she definitely pushes the law of attraction and the kind of new age version.
Yeah. And a lot of other stuff.
And, you know, I think that when you are that successful, it must be really easy to want to tell people that they can be that successful too, and all they need to do is X, Y, and Z, and it will magically happen.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be hard not to want to tell that story as well, because it's an inspiring story.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have an inspiring story and tell it, while at the same time talking about the barriers that people face, and talking about, okay, not only do you need to work hard, but we all together need to figure out how to combat the structural issues that are going to keep you from success.
Yeah.
Because they're still there.
Yeah.
Even if you're working your ass off every day of your life.
Yeah. And it's selling a worldview where it's like, no one's going to help you, but also you don't have to help anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a really depressing way to live, you know?
It is. Yeah.
And it's really isolating, because I think it creates the sense that like, and it makes sense that like you create better customers this way, because, you know, they all are thinking individualistically, but that implicitly in this worldview, you are in competition with everybody else. Right.
Yeah.
And like, and it's a zero-sum game. And, you know, nobody wins unless somebody loses, basically. And so it's this idea that you're preaching to these people in this big congregation. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, people I think love MLMs partly because it allows people to like go to conventions and get psyched and listen to pop music and have this big feeling of like togetherness that we crave from just like going to concerts and church and whatever else. But also that like, you know, you're competing with all the people in that room.
Yeah.
And that's a different feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess some churches are very competitive, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, on one hand, it's like that. And on the other hand, it's this like, well, we can all be this rich. So I don't have to worry about being a billionaire because anyone could do it. And so I just did it. And there's no reason I need to feel anything weird about this huge amount of wealth I'm hoarding.
And I need to hoard it harder.
I need to hoard it harder.
Because no one will help me if it goes away.
Right.
And if it goes away, it will be my fault. It will be because there is something wrong with my soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like the second things really would go wrong in the lives of people like this, they would find someone or something to blame.
Yes.
But perhaps I'm
because
wrong.
it's everyone has to take total responsibility except me, though. That would be
except
terrible.
me, though.
Yeah.
More after this. We want to send our love to our Los Angeles area listeners affected by these devastating fires. You can find ways to donate, lend support, and stay safe in our episode notes. And now, back to the show. So, a word for kind of what we're talking about that Amanda wrote about in her article is a term coined by this man named David Gray, who's a historian at Oklahoma State. And he sees Chicken Soup for the Soul as part of a rise in this motivational rhetoric that he calls like neoliberal mysticism, which is, I think, a very cool term that really, encompasses the fact that this is very American, very individualistic, very bootstrap. It's just exactly like the Puritan work ethic that we've all been fed over and over and over again. And it's just manifested in like this feel-good book. And it's like hidden in all these little crevices of our lives, it seems like.
Yeah.
This idea that you can think and work your way out of any situation, no matter who you are. And it's just such a terrible, terrible lie that we don't have to combat structural issues. And it's just this really easy way for powerful people to remain in power because of this lie that we've been sold. And it's very depressing.
It's incredibly depressing. And I get that it's an ideology that takes off when people are feeling scarcity, which I think, and it's like, it feels like this is a mindset that has grown and grown as a way of life and as a kind of a sales model in the United States since the 70s. And I guess maybe you could also put Amway as one of the starting points because that's kind of one of the first MLMs, I think. And it makes sense that like we, from the 70s to now also marks really the death of the American working class.
Yeah. Right.
That like the death of kind of like, Ronald Reagan famously grew up as a New Deal Democrat and then switched parties, but, was able to become president because of the policies of the opposing party that he then, proceeded to wipe out.
Yeah.
And that legacy has really stood, as you know. And I feel like these things are related, that like, as it becomes harder and harder to just get a job doing something normal, just like selling something, making something, moving something around, just the thing jobs that are scarcer every year.
Yeah.
That we have the kind of MLM, prosperity gospel, direct sales pyramid scheme side of things, I think has gotten bigger and bigger, both as business and as a lifestyle, because there's nothing to sell except vibes.
That's so true. Yeah. And I mean, David Gray also pointed out that the neoliberal mysticism has like risen directly proportional to like a decline in job security and medical benefits and wages.
Yeah.
And I think we can look at like a populist movement like we just saw happen where working class folks are essentially tricked into believing that an administration cares about them because Elon Musk is a billionaire and talking to them, even though he's very mean to them. And we've seen that recently.
While using his toddler as a human shield.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of like he is almost like a totem himself. Yeah. Like he's this thing that you can pray toward and, you will manifest what he has. And that's why you see people so vehemently defending him in a way where you're just like, this is so uncomfortable, but there has to be some kind of mystical element to it. I just can't imagine that there's not.
Yeah. Because people are worshiping figureheads who represent everything they hate, because he's like, like a foreigner with a confusingly shaped body. We hate that here.
Oh, he loves Ozempic. Yeah.
Who names his kids weird combinations of letters. And, it's just and the Trump thing, too, right? That this is we know this all so well. It almost feels kind of redundant to point it out, or you kind of forget about it after a while. But that it's, you know, the Republican Party. It's like the family friendly, family values, Christianity, God and home and country. And it's like, they're not about any of those things anymore. They've kind of sliced them all off one by one. And all they're left with is, you know, profit mongering and paranoia, which I guess was what was the skeleton of those things all along. But it's nice of them to say the quiet part out loud.
Finally. Yeah. And it's like, so all the billionaires go to Burning Man and go take ayahuasca and feel like they're somehow divinely inspired creators. And
then they all puke and shit themselves to death, ideally, because none of them have been hydrating.
Yes. Yeah. Sand in their fucking eyes, I hope.
It's also like, I find it, have we ever talked about, there's this movie called A Face in the Crowd that I really love. It's great. We should watch it sometime. Okay. It's like Andy Griffith, like around the time of the Andy Griffith show. I don't know if it was like before, during, or after. Might have been right before. But it's like, the plot is that Patricia Neal is like, working for some like TV station in the South somewhere, and she like finds him in a drunk tank when she's doing some kind of like a local color piece and interviews him, and he's a hit. And so she kind of makes him into a folk icon whose nickname is Lonesome Rhodes. And he's just like a folksy guy and everybody loves him, but fame gets to him and he becomes a monster, you know, and he like takes a teenage bride and everything goes to his head. And so it's, the ending is that she stops his path of destruction when he's doing his TV show, and he's got a mic on that's turned off, but he's talking about how stupid his audience is and how much contempt he has for them. And so she turns it on and hot mics him. And then it's like, and then it was all over and everyone hated him, the end. And it's like, yeah, it turns out what we're realizing, and maybe people are built different now, but probably not, that like people will idolize figureheads of this kind who so obviously would hate them or actually do hate them, you know, even if it's based on race or religion. And that there's something revealing about that, where we can't be like, well, that doesn't make sense, because it's like, okay, yeah, it doesn't, but people are doing it. So we can't really get them to stop by pointing out that it seems contradictory. Like, I think it feels almost representative of like needing some tyrannical parent figure to finally like you. And the fact that their love is so valuable is related to the fact that, you know, you can't get it, but maybe you could someday.
Yeah, which it still feels similar to like the law of attraction or something like that. Where like if you just, you know, again, it's even in the abusive relationship sense. Like if I just alter my behavior enough, right?
Oh, God. Yeah. God, that is what it is. The prosperity gospel is just like, like the fawning response to abuse, where it's like, you're in a system, you can't control it. Don't try to leave. Don't ask for it to be different. Just like, learn to love it, babe.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all your dreams will come true.
Yeah. And change yourself and fix yourself. And you are the one who can somehow convince this world to treat you better, all through your own behavior, and sleep on a bag of sawdust every night.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I hate it.
I hate it so much.
My name is Orenthal James Simpson, but you can call me OJ.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard because I have a lot of people in my life that I love that do like subscribe to the law of attraction. And I think that there is nothing wrong with that idea that like attracts like. Like, yeah, when I'm more positive, which isn't all that often, unfortunately, but when I am able to cultivate positivity, like my life is better. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Like it's good. And you can attract, quote unquote, like, yeah, if you're like healing yourself and going to therapy, you're going to attract a better relationship.
Yeah.
But it's more that you're going to choose a better relationship.
Yes. Right. It's the law of choosing.
Yeah. The law of choosing. And that is empowering. And I just think there are good parts of these philosophies, and I'm totally down with them until they're applied.
Yes.
To someone on welfare or something like that. Like, oh, well, this is all your fault because you didn't like think correctly.
Mm-hmm. Or until you're selling them to people. And I mean, and so, you know, and I'm thinking of like Dave Hollis, the late ex-husband of Rachel Hollis, you know, they were like a motivational speaking power couple for a while. And one of the things about him I just always think of when I think of this is like him doing this like live stream that kind of went awry, where like his daughter kept asking for him to make her pancakes and he kept being like, no, I'm doing a live, you know, which is like it's never a good look, you know?
No.
Yeah, and he had this book that he'd written, was just kind of like, you know, and clearly was like not doing well in life, and as many of these people aren't. But his line, which I'm sure is not at all unique to him, was like, you know, if I had $0 and I needed to scrape together the like $15 or whatever that this book costs, like I would find a way to get it, because this book will fix everything for you. And it's like, how do you sleep at night if you are telling people, as I think so many people in this business are, to literally, you know, spend money that they could otherwise spend on like food or heating or car payments or whatever, things that they actually need, in order to buy a little motivational book that will basically just tell them to keep thinking positive and bother their high school friends on Facebook.
And then once the book's over, they'll have 3 days of feeling some kind of way, and then it'll go away and they'll say, okay, well, I guess I need to get the next one and the next one. And that's how the self-help industry works, as we know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we really hashed it out, babe.
I love it.
Now I want to tell you about the lawsuit.
Yes.
So in 2008, we dismiss Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. We give them the credit that they didn't do what I'm about to explain happened. So goodbye, Jack. Goodbye, Mark. And
goodbye. It's been fun.
Hello, Bill Rohana.
Oh, hi, Bill.
Okay. So the company is sold to Bill Rohana in 2008, and the editor-in-chief is a woman named Amy Newark, his wife, and she is a former hedge fund executive. And she says, quote, "We're a socially conscious company, and everything we do is designed to share happiness, inspiration, and wellness in an entertaining fashion. Our motive is to always give back and do what's right for people."
Great.
Do you believe that that's what's going to happen, Sarah?
I don't. I've had some context clues, but also that was not a convincing statement.
So Bill Rohana creates Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, which is a separate entity from Chicken Soup for the Soul, the company. Okay. Now, this is going to get into a lot of like business shit that I do not understand. And no matter how many times I read it, I don't get how businesses work with boards and going public. I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, me either. So I appreciate your candor.
Great. Perfect.
Because I can't help you here either, really.
So I'm just going to do my best. And there's so much that I'm not including. So go out, go forth, and read more, people. So Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment ended up buying the streaming service Crackle. They also bought Screen Media and Sonar Entertainment. But most importantly, they bought Redbox.
Oh my God.
For $50 million in stock in 2022. Okay.
What? No.
Smart.
You guys.
They truly believed that physical media was going to make a comeback.
Why?
Okay.
I mean, look, I like to say that, but I'm not spending any $50 million on thinking that, you know, I'm just going to think it privately.
So not only did they spend that $50 million, they also had to take on $325 million in debt that the company had. Good God. Yes.
But they believed in their decision, so I'm sure it worked out. They wrote $325 million on a little dollar bill and taped it up to the ceiling.
So, unsurprisingly, Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment had to file bankruptcy after they lost $636 million in 2023.
God. You guys.
I know.
Sounds like you didn't want it enough.
And keep in mind that like they're still selling other stuff under the Chicken Soup for the Soul company banner. So they're like selling pet food and all this other like random shit. Yeah. Yes. So they've really like continued to like build that company, but then Chicken Soup for the Soul is a different company. But then there is like conflicts of interest and some very like shady things that are happening, you know, in business ways that I don't understand.
Yeah. Like as long as we're not pretending we know how it works, I'm happy with that.
No, I would never. So after the bankruptcy, that's when we see 20,000 Redbox kiosks closed. So if you're upset about that.
I was wondering where they went, to be honest. I had no idea that I had the Chicken Soup for the Soul people to blame.
Yes, you do. So Bill Rahana, according to former employees, especially ones who are writing exposés on Reddit and Medium, they claim that he has had like very shady business practices for decades. And like, again, it's hard for me to summarize, but we can just say with at least some clarity that this is a shady motherfucker. Okay. Allegedly. Allegedly
shady, allegedly a motherfucker.
We're just going to we're going to slap a fat allegedly on all this lawsuit stuff because it's unfolding right now. So
everything I say is alleged.
Yeah. That's what I always say about you. So there has been a lawsuit filed against Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment and Bill, as well as Amy, in fact, that they, quote, engaged in a scheme to defraud employees, not only out of their hard-earned compensation and siphon such money away for their own personal benefit, but also deducted wages from employees' paychecks for medical and dental premiums while allowing these policies to lapse and ultimately get canceled. Yeah.
No.
This resulted in employees unknowingly incurring millions in unreimbursed medical expenses. The defendants engaged in an elaborate Ponzi scheme, setting up multiple business entities under the umbrella of the until now warm-hearted brand Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Jesus, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Really dark. Really, really, really dark.
Yeah. Also, it's like, were they not paying insurance premiums because they were just like trying to cut some corners and then ended up like even more millions of dollars in debt than they were already because of that, because they were both horrible and stupid?
I mean, I think this is like happening now, right? Like the lawsuit has just been filed this last year, like in July.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this is part of why I wanted to do this episode, because I heard about this and I was like, holy shit.
That is, I mean, it's so horrible, but also it's like, based on everything we've talked about, I'm like, yeah. I believe that. Yeah. That is what those people would do.
Absolutely.
Like, if you believe the message of those stories, you also can, I think, at a certain point, come all the way around to believing that you do believe to defraud everyone under you. Because if they were good enough, then they would not be under you, would they?
Yeah. And I do want to just like give credit to Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen that they didn't do this shit. You know, I mean, it's like,
that's true.
They did a lot of things that I dislike, and I just dislike their general messaging. But this is a level of cruelty that is pretty extreme.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So when they filed bankruptcy 2023, they were past due on payroll, on bonuses, and on benefits. And then they fired 1,000 workers without severance or the back pay that they were owed.
God.
Yeah.
Also, I can't believe they had that many people working for them. What were they doing?
I don't know. It
doesn't matter
what they were doing. Yeah. But yeah, as mentioned, their medical insurance claims started getting denied. And then they realized that they had not had insurance for months, which is
oh my God,
so sick.
Yes. Well, and it's like something that is so easy for a company to, you know, it's just like it's you being forced to put your trust in the entity you work for and them abusing that trust to such an extent and so carelessly, you know, it really, it does.
Yeah. And so now 11 former employees have filed a lawsuit against Bill for greed at shocking levels.
Oh, that's great. And maybe someday he'll, have to sleep on a bag of sawdust.
We can only hope. And they're seeking $1 billion in damages. And Amy Newark is also named in the lawsuit. So there we go.
They deserve it.
Yeah, no shit. And then also back in 2023, there were a bunch of filmmakers who had been doing business with Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment through a studio that they acquired called 1091 Entertainment, and they were not paying those filmmakers their share of profits. And these people are owed thousands and thousands of dollars of streaming revenue that they just kept saying, we have cash flow issues. We have cash flow issues. We can't pay these indie filmmakers who, of course, are having a very hard time being able to pay for a lawsuit to get the money that they're owed, which is another dark part of this.
Yeah. It's that thing too, where it's that kind of thing of like, never give up on your dreams, never question your goals, just stay fixated on what you want no matter what. It's like, what if what you want is stupid and terrible? What if what you want is to spend tens of millions of dollars on like a sure to fail acquisition while denying your employees their basic human rights,
Yeah. And just coming back to the thing of like, okay, were these employees just not visualizing getting paid enough? Or were they just not visualizing having the insurance that you told them that they were supposed to have?
I guess they weren't. I guess they should have visualized having insurance. But to be fair, they didn't know that they didn't have any.
Yeah.
So again, it does come back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if Bill has been visualizing going to prison. Here it comes. So that is where we currently stand with the Chicken Soup for the Soul company, which has basically gone under.
Well, they had a good run.
They had a good run. And it's very confusing, right? Because they're Chicken Soup for the Soul, they're Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, and everything's just a huge tangled mess right now. So
just like a bowl of soup.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
For whatever happens with this. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be back for your inevitable biopic. Is there are there people who you would cast in like the movie version of this? Like are there who would play Mark Victor and Jack?
I'm going to send you a picture and you can tell me because you're much better at this because, are you going to love this shit?
I bet I'm going to recognize these pictures. Maybe
you could,
or maybe not, but there's like pictures from the back of the book that I've been trying to summon in my mind this whole time.
That's Mark Victor Hansen texted.
I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He looks like he's going to eat me.
Yeah, he does. Any casting?
Woody Harrelson.
Ooh, fun.
Right?
Love it. Down. And here is our Jack Canfield.
I feel like I remember his face slightly better. This is kind of like the face I was projecting on both of them.
He's got such a nice guy face.
I just want to like pinch one of those cheeks,
I know.
Yeah. Because this is what 40% of American men this age look like, but none of them are in Hollywood. John Tenney, the guy from the Sex and the City sequel show, and Just Like That, who goes out with Carrie and then they throw up in the street.
Looking him up. Oh, yeah. Great.
There we go.
Great.
Cast.
Perfect. Cast. Done. So the last thing I just wanted to talk about, to put it even more into context with American hysteria and You're Wrong About, is this term called glurge. Have you ever heard this word?
Yes, I have, because I used to love reading Snopes.com in high school.
Yes. Do you want to tell us what the definition of glurge is by your account?
I would adore to, yeah, because this was a word that came to mind when we were talking about these stories. And it's Snopes had a whole glurge section when I was reading it. And it was, like an early site that was trying to fact check these sort of email stories that were going around and stuff. And so I think the definition of glurge was like, it feels like a combination of chicken noodle soup and sugar. Like it's two things that theoretically should be good, but it feels wrong.
Yeah.
And I know there's like a better or a more detailed definition, but I always think of the example of like the story that got passed around, approximately in the 90s, but I'm sure has a long life, of like the little boy is told that his sister needs a blood transfusion.
Yes.
And he says, okay. Yeah, you tell it.
Well, that's actually amazing because I have that exact story as the exact example.
You do. It's the perfect example.
It's also part of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book.
Oh my God.
Let's see. It's called On Courage. It tells the story of a little girl with a rare and potentially deadly disease. She needed a blood transfusion from her 5-year-old brother, who also had the same disease but survived, his blood now containing the antibodies that could save his sister. So in the story, the boy takes a deep breath, contemplates the request of the doctor to give his sister this life-saving blood transfusion, and he agrees. As he lays next to his sister in the hospital bed with the tubes between them, his sister's face starts to grow rosier and his more pale. With a shaking voice, he asks the doctor, "Am I going to die right away?" He thought that saving his sister's life meant dying himself, and yet he was still willing to do it.
And you know, there was someone else who saved our life despite dying himself, and his name was Jesus.
Never heard of him.
I feel like that to me, like, I'm sure that it's many people clearly are like, it's a wonderful story, isn't it great? And it's like, in a way, but also in a way it's horrible. And it's a horrible thing to want children to be like, because like, why do they have to lie next to each other like they're Victorian dogs, you know, being like experimented on by some like gentleman surgeon? And B, this idea that like, yes, isn't it wonderful, the noble nature of children who will so willingly die for those they love? And it's like, kids aren't like that, and they shouldn't have to be like that. And it's wrong of us to want or celebrate the idea of them being like that. Like a child who accepts death at 5 either doesn't know what he's talking about, which is true, or B, is so traumatized that he needs massive therapy because he probably grew up in a war zone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I know it's like, yes, if you get your heartwarming hit from it, then whatever. But like, what I think of now as an adult is this idea of like, that story only makes sense if no one explained this to him. Mm-hmm. If no one was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some, you're going to feel a little pinch, and then we're going to take a little bit of your blood, which is what your heart pumps around your body to help oxygen get to all of your parts. And you're going to feel a little bit of pain, but then it's all going to be great and you're going to have a cookie.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't anyone say that to this child?
I know. Why didn't anyone explain what a blood transfusion was? It just assumed that he would understand.
Right. And it's this sort of like, it feels like this very dangerously kind of like coming around, like all the end on the far side of the spectrum of it, this very sort of like sinister, you know, Annie Wilkes cuteness over morality kind of perspective of like, isn't it precious that children are like Jesus? And it's like, they're not. Yeah. And they shouldn't have to be. So leave them alone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, you're hitting it on the head here because like Glurge, which I want to give credit to Patricia Chapin, who was a member of the Urban Legends discussion mailing list of the Snopes.com website, which is something I wish I could have been involved in the 90s. Yeah. And it's the sound Glurge is supposed to like imitate the sound of retching or like vomiting that might be induced by stories of this kind.
Or when you start to and then you control it, but it was a close one. Yeah.
And like the definition online here that I'm seeing is like overly sentimental stories with a moral, often with hidden negative undertones.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. And that's kind of what all of these stories we've read have been. And a lot of them, just like urban legends, are recycled. Like this story we talked about just now claims that it's original in Chicken Soup for the Soul, claims to be a new story, but its similar version can be found in this like 1974 issue of a Mormon magazine, as well as in a 1925 Mary Pickford movie called Little Annie Rooney.
Oh my God, of course.
You know, so it's like an urban legend. It comes back.
It's the village pony.
It's just, it's just a version of the same story being told again and again, meant to elicit kind of this sentimental feeling rather than fear that is usually the, what an urban legend is trying to elicit out of a person. Right. But they're still kind of functioning in a really similar way.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like it's in the way that an urban legend misdirects your fear towards something implausible, but kind of exciting to think about. This one is like, don't think about actual children and the frequently annoying ways they behave. Think about this fantasy child.
Yeah. Yeah. This Christ-like fantasy child for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, look, we have to, like, people, I'm so tired of people having kids and then acting shocked at the way they are. Like, kids, as far as I can tell, are annoying 80% of the time, like not all of them, but a lot of them. And if you think you're going to have one who isn't, then like good luck. But
good luck.
Just like have kids and like just sign off on them being really irritating and that you're going to love it. Because if you don't want that, then you should get a dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And so to kind of close out, I think that it's interesting to point out, like we've talked about how deeply, deeply American all of this is. The law of attraction, prosperity gospel, the idea that you can manifest your own destiny no matter what.
And all you have to do is murder everyone and then take their land.
Exactly. And nothing will stand in your way unless you let it stand in your way.
Yeah. And if you kill it, and by it I mean them, then you won't.
Yeah, exactly. So the Chicken Soup for the Soul books aren't as well received in other countries. Jack Canfield said at one point that 315 million copies were circulating in China.
But they were being used to like as booster seats for children.
They were actually included in school curriculum sometimes, which they were here too. I remember that definitely.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that too now that you say that actually, which is really like what a great get as a publisher.
Oh my God. Yeah.
From an adult perspective. Yeah.
But in China, chicken soup, because of these books, the term chicken soup became Chinese slang for uplifting stories with no substance and advice that makes you feel better but doesn't solve your problems.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, that's pretty much the concise point of these two episodes, is that it makes you feel better but doesn't solve your problems.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It doesn't have to solve your problems, but it shouldn't make barriers for you feeling like you can solve your problems.
Right. Yeah. And also it's like, if it does make you feel better, then that's great. And I know that it did in some ways for me. And there were stories that like, you know, and it's not always so prosperity gospel-y, but it feels like that's the river that runs through it, you know?
Yeah.
But that like, yeah, that ultimately the underlying message of it is very paranoid, right? Where it's like the only people who are lovable are the ones who are like so self-sacrificing that they want to die for their sister or spend the last days of their life at a motivational conference.
Yes. Sleep on bags of flour.
You know, and that no one will help you and no one should help you and everyone is all alone. And that's a very grim worldview. And it makes sense to me that everyone who subscribes to that is just kind of insisting on how happy they are.
Yeah.
Because I think they might not be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, it's like, it's not that Chicken Soup for the Soul is some evil tome, you know, it's not like it's fine if you enjoy uplifting stories.
We don't have to say books we don't like are evil. We just say we don't like them and leave it at that.
Yeah. And I enjoyed reading it. I mean, there were some stories that I was like, that's a nice message. Like, I get that story. That story makes sense to me. And so, again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because just like anything, it has positive qualities that we didn't really get into because
we had so much else to talk about.
You know what the positive qualities are. They make you feel something in your heart and you smile and maybe you shed a tear. And that's nice. Good. Great.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of the stories that affected me, like, or the one kind of positive one that jumps to mind, or that isn't so much about like manifesting big diamonds, is like a story about a mother and her son who were in a car accident. And he gives her helps her to have the perseverance to like crawl out of it, basically, something like that.
Yeah.
I think that was in the first one.
Yeah, I remember that.
And still, it's like, you know, let's not imply that people who don't crawl out of grievous accidents don't want it enough. But I mean, that story in itself doesn't. It's just the context that sort of makes that point and the whole book overall. But like, that was a story I liked as a kid. And it's just like very like the most basic, like ground floor level of it is like perseverance is good. And it's like, yes, but also you didn't need a vast empire to tell people that.
Yeah, exactly.
And also it isn't always good. I think perseverance as an American value is oversold. And there are a lot of dreams that people should give up on because often, and I don't mean that in like a dad and Flashdance way, but I just mean that like a lot of life is like choosing one initial dream and then moving towards it and then realizing that the steps that you've taken have made you realize that you actually like this other thing more. Like maybe you want to start off like being in Wicked on Broadway. And then you realize that you really are more interested in costumes. And then you do that for a while. And then you realize you hate theater people and that you want to work in like antique costume preservation. And you end up this cool museum in, you know, Western Massachusetts. And then you realize that you also can't stand museum people. But then you get really into falcons. I don't know. But it's just like the fact that life is so random is scary, but it's also where all the good stuff happens. Because if we all had the lives that we sat down and asked for ourselves, especially when we were young, then like we would be bored. We would be so bored.
Oh, you're so right. Sarah, thank you so much for manifesting this episode with me and going on this journey. This was so much fun, and you always just bring so much to the things I'm already thinking about and just make them so rich. So, and not in diamonds.
No, but in a better way. We're in the stew. We're like bubbling along, and I love it. And yeah, I love working with you, and we're recording this on January 3rd, Florence Pugh's birthday. So this is my first podcast episode of the year, and it just feels so great to be starting this year with you. And I want to manifest doing more episodes with you.
Oh my God, please. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Put it on the vision board, baby.
Okay, I'm putting it on there next to the banoffee pie.
Perfect. This was American Hysteria. Sarah and I have one more wild and out of control show for you in LA on January 24th, where You're Wrong About and American Hysteria have teamed up with our producer Miranda's Fleetwood Mac tribute band, The Little Lies, for a theatrical night of conversation, music, magic tricks, drag, burlesque, and so much more. That's January 24th in LA at the Regent Theater. You can find a link to get tickets in the episode notes. If you want to help support American Hysteria and make sure we can continue making the show, you can head to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. Not only will you get ad-free episodes, but you'll also get bonus content, like Hysteria Home Companion, the other podcast I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we're covering or stories we know that you'll love. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. If you're feeling generous with your time, you can leave us a 5-star review on the app that you use. It really helps us out, and it's a really easy thing to do. You could do it right now. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have the best week that's possible under the circumstances.